Hello, beautiful bookish family. Welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name's Steph. I hope you're doing well. I am in the mood to do some cleaning. I don't know if you guys feel this way. Let me know if you ever just look at your bookshelves and go, do I need that? Does it Marie Kondo me? Does it make me feel joy? And I woke up this morning and said, you know what? It doesn't. I don't know what just came over me. I'm in a cleaning mood, which probably means that it's time for a yearly fall unhaul.
I could change the world.
One stack and two stack. Some of these titles are going to be very surprising, and some of them will not be so surprising. Some of them were fun, high-rated reads, some of them were low-rated reads, and some of them are books I'm just never going to get to. Where should we start? Let's start with the titles that I enjoyed, but they're just taking up space on my shelf. It's time to get rid of them. There's going to be three parts to this video. There's the stack of books that I really loved, but maybe that they can be better in another home. Another larger stack of books that I have no intention of rereading, or a final third pile of books that, let's be real, I'm just never going to pick them up, so why am I keeping them? Let's start with these were great, but I don't need them. The biggest shock. Is it the biggest shock of this video? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on if you've been here for a while. If you know me, you know I love Mistborn. Mistborn is amazing. But these editions, these mass market paperbacks, these covers make me so sad. I really cannot stand these covers. I love Mistborn so much. I read the third book, which is Hero of Ages. I read it on ebook from my library, and I enjoyed it just as much as these physical copies. I didn't even annotate them because I just knew right away that I wasn't going to reread these copies, so why waste my time annotating them? When it comes to annotating, it's with the intention of, if I really enjoy this, I'm going to reread it later, or I'm going to use the notes for an in-depth review. But with these, I was having so much fun with them, but at the same time was not enjoying these editions. The thing with mass market paperbacks like this is that the text is so tiny, the pages are super thin. It feels like you're not going anywhere. At least with the ebook edition, I could see what percentage I'm at or how many hours I have left. It would be so much more satisfying to have this on my shelf in a much more beautiful copy. So I'm getting rid of Mistborn Book 1 and Mistborn Book 2, even though they're some of my favorite books. That's all I've been talking about this year. Covers matter to me. I'm not even gonna pretend that they don't. I struggle to enjoy a book that I physically find poorly designed. As an artist, that is my biggest pet peeve, is when the cover doesn't match, or something about the design aspect is just making me question why this was an artistic decision. That's what I get with this. There's way better cover options that we could have done with that. That's going. Next is Aurora Rising. Now, I am interested in reading book 2. I'm not interested in book 2 enough to buy it. I've realized this year that J. Kristoff is not my writer. The sarcasm doesn't work for me. Although this was a really fun read, it's not something that I see myself rereading. It's a YA sci-fi adventure. There's aliens, there's superpowers, there's a quiz in the back, which is pretty cool to tell you what part of the crew that you would be on, what position you would play, whether it be the captain, the pilot, the whatever, which is really fun. But this was for a much younger audience. The only reason that I'm really interested is because the very last few chapters of the book did some interesting world building as far as aliens and relationships are concerned, but I would much rather get the second book from my library and read it that way. I'm not going to reread this. And arc, actually one of the very first arcs that I got when I started booktubing. I'm trying to find a booktuber who would like me to send this to them. All of the books that I'm unhauling are either going to be gifted to my school library, maybe gifted to a booktube friend if there's someone who wants this, or donated to a free little library. I don't really sell back my books. I would much rather give them to other people who I think are going to appreciate them. Plus, this is an arc. Nobody should be selling arcs. That just defeats the whole purpose of an arc. And
why do we do that?
if you would like this book, please message me or contact me. I'll be happy to send it to you. If the shipping is something that's a little bit more, I might ask you to just pitch in for the shipping if that's okay. But I think that I really did enjoy this when I first read it. It was a lot of fun. The sports were fun. The world building was fun. And I know that book 2 came out pretty recently, but I don't see myself actually rereading this one. If anything, I see myself reading the second book, maybe borrowing it from a library. If this doesn't get picked up by a fellow booktuber who would like to review it in maybe the next week or so after posting this video, I might just donate it to one of my students who I think might benefit from reading an Own Voices Latinx story. Surprise, surprise. Binti book 1, I'm going to unhaul. I like Binti, but I started listening to book 2 on audio, realizing that I like the audiobook for Binti much more. Plus, I can get it at my library. While I do enjoy Binti, it's not one of my favorite sci-fi series. I see it as something that's enjoyable, but I still gave it, I want to say I gave it 3 stars. Book 2 seems to be so far, because I'm currently reading book 2 at the time of filming this video, answering or attempting to answer some questions that I had in book 1. I did do some annotations in here, and this was the book club pick for the month of July for the Interstellar book club. But I don't see myself rereading this volume anytime in the future. If it's not a 4 or 5 star that will potentially be reread in the future, it's just not giving me joy being on my shelves. I'd rather just borrow it from the library and give this to someone who's much more hyped about reading Binti. This cover is beautiful though. This cover brings me joy. The narrator for the audiobook is doing such an amazing job, especially with the fact that fantasy and sci-fi audiobooks don't usually work well for me. I can't usually do an audiobook that's not a nonfiction or a thriller or something that takes a little bit less brain power in the imaginative area to digest what is happening in the scene in front of me. Pausing a book to really think about what's happening where, what's in the room, thinking about the clothes, thinking about the character design, those are things that I take my time with and kind of what makes me a slower reader. But it's working really well with Binti because book 1 really set us up with a lot of the visuals of how things appeared. Since that information is already in here, I'm digesting it on audio much faster. Plus the narrator's voice is really good. They're doing an amazing job. I'm just preferring the audiobook to this. Now for the books that I'm not going to reread for various reasons. These books are just not bringing me joy being on my shelves. Sorry to break some hearts. And Ember in the Ashes. Earlier in 2021, I was part of a readathon with my friends Jane, Esme, and Sasha. We were hosting a read-along in which we were reading one book from this series. There was 4 books in the series in total each month. I DNF'd the series after book 1. I really did not like book 1. I'm sorry. I really tried. I just couldn't get into the world. The characters weren't my jam. They were making decisions that just didn't seem logical to me. I know a lot of other people really love this. Yeah, this book just wasn't for me. And it's in pristine condition. I did not write in it at all. If you're a big annotator, let me know if you also feel like you know in the first couple pages of a book whether it's going to be worth annotating or not. I got the vibes in the first few pages that this was not going to be a book that would deem necessary for annotating, so I was putting little tabs in it that I can take out later. That way when I pass this along to someone, they would enjoy it a lot more. But it just didn't make the cut for me. much prefer hard magic systems where there's clear delineations of what you can and cannot do, or things are not based on coincidence. If things are based in coincidence, then it's very rare that coincidences happen. But there seemed to be a lot of coincidence in here, not just in the magic, but also in the way that characters were building relationships or happening to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, it just passed too many thresholds for me of things that I'm just not vibing with. And that's okay. I know that a lot of other people love this, so I hope that whoever I pass this along to or picks it up at the free little library or wherever I drop this off, that they love it too. This one should not be a surprise for anyone who's been following my channel. If you've been with me since January, you know I cannot stand Sookie Stackhouse. I cannot stand this book. If you love it, I appreciate you. This rant review has not been made even though this book was read 10 months ago, because the rage that fills my heart every time I think about it. There will be a full rant review at some time before the end of this year when I can gather my thoughts without wanting to scream. But let's just say that I am over vampire stories where we have main protagonists who we're supposed to enjoy that were Confederate soldiers. That is not cute. That is not hot, especially when there's supposed to be some sort of redemption arc, but they never talk about how they've been along for so long that maybe they had specific world viewpoints 200-300 years ago because of their white privilege that was not checked or has shifted in the past 300 years because they lived through times change, things happen. Listen, I'm ranting now. We're not going to do that. This is not the rant video. There will be a video for that, okay? Being that there is a very strong following for Sookie Stackhouse, this is book 1. Sookie Stackhouse, I think, is the name of the series. Dead Until Dark is book 1, but this was adapted into True Blood, the TV series, which I heard from people who've watched it that they actually take out a lot of the problematic elements that I found in here. Good for them. So being that there is a very large following for Sookie Stackhouse, it would make me happy to make someone else happy to read this book, because it wasn't for me. If that person, whoever it is, can get through my rage annotations. A self-help book that I don't even know if I've ever mentioned on this channel that I've read. This book did something for me a long time ago, and this is a book about being creative. It's Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. How to say this? I'm not a very spiritual person, but this book is very spiritual for creative people. So it did something for me when I was in a time in which I was struggling with my creativity, whether it's worth being creative when you feel like you keep having these ideas that you think are great, but you see that other people have executed them already and you wonder to yourself, should I even bother? This gave me motivation to create, so I think that this is an interesting self-help book for anyone who's thinking about being creative and needs a little bit of push. I would rather make a video about how to work through that creative roadblock in another way that this book kind of touched on, but didn't really go into depth to. So I appreciate this book for what it did at the time that I needed it to, but I don't think I'm going to reread it. The main message of this book is ingrained in my head, and I think about it sometimes, but from a different, non-spiritual standpoint that works better for me. If that's a video that anyone is really interested in how to work through creative roadblocks, let me know. I've been saying I want to make art-related videos on my channel more often, but sometimes I just get a little angsty about what to say, but I think that's something that I would have a lot to say on, so let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to hear about. Death of a Salesman is, I read this in college. It's a play also. Did the book come before the play or did the book come after the play? I don't remember, but the story is very short. It's a very clear message, even though I read this and watched the production years ago. It's still crystal clear in my mind. This is not going to get reread, but it was very good for what it did at the time. If you want a story set in, I believe, the 1900s about an American family and pursuing, I think, the American dream or what it means to have stability, this might be something that interests you. Another book that I switched over to audio for, which worked out much better for me because I personally found this book to be heavy on sarcasm and tried to be humorous with different voices, both from the author and from their father and other people in their lives, that worked better on narration because on page it was hard for me to decipher who was speaking, if that makes any sense. This is One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter by Sachi Cole. Apologies if I'm saying that name incorrectly. It was interesting, but definitely not something that I see myself rereading. It was interesting to get this person's perspective of being I believe they're Canadian Indian, traveling back to their country, talking about family dynamics, immigration, relationships, interracial relationships, and some scandal that happened with them on Twitter. I want to say it was Twitter, or maybe it was an article because they were journalists. At the time of reading it, I might have given this 4 stars, but I don't remember much. So I'm just gonna get rid of it. A classic that I have no intention of reading. The Odyssey by Homer. I read this over 15 years ago in high school. So maybe even more than 15 years ago. I read this so long ago. I was probably like 13 or 14 when I read this. Watched the movie, did all that stuff. Was it good? Yes. Was it interesting? Yes. Am I going to reread it? No. A book community favorite and staple, Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. I didn't like it. Sorry. There is also a very huge Friedrich Nietzsche following. And although I appreciate the things that are trying to be said, I just did not like this book. This is one that I switched over to the audiobook for, I want to say, after the first 20 pages, I switched this over to audio. It was much easier to digest in audio format because it's in the form of a lot of speeches and monologues. This book, I see why it's so popular, because it has important messages that potentially really could withstand the test of time, as there are messages that a lot of people struggle with, whether it's from a philosophical perspective, whether it's from an epistemological perspective, whether it's from a spiritual perspective. Everyone goes through, I think, times in their life in which different segments of this book will be helpful to them, but at the time of reading this, that is not a place in my life that I was in. I already was more solidified in the way that I've decided to go about looking at life and what I need in my life, and having direction of how I'm going to go forward in choosing what is of value in my life, or where my energy or theological ideas may stand. So this book was just not for me. Not that it was bad, it was just, someone else will enjoy this. I know they will, because it has a huge following. Anna Karenina, which I actually really love. Anna Karenina. This is another one that I haven't spoken about on, I think, my channel at all. Maybe once, if not, maybe twice, but most likely once in the past year and a half, or however long I've been on booktube at this point. Anna Karenina is one of those classics that really worked for me when I read it pre-booktube, but I don't see myself rereading this. There are certain moments from the story that I have in my imagination from reading it that resonate as nostalgia, but if anything, I might just watch one of the movie adaptations if I feel like revisiting this story. The next two I'm gonna show together at once because they're both books that I read for a master's course that I've been working on. So in my state, we have a program in which teachers can get an additional certification onto their license for being able to teach about the Holocaust, genocides, prevention, and prejudice reduction. So these are two books that I read for that master's program. However, I don't need them anymore. I just needed certain excerpts of them, certain pages in order to write certain reports that I had to do. They were interesting, they were insightful. I have my notes that I can reflect back on in case I ever need to revisit these. But honestly, the class is over. I have my notes that I can keep and resources that I got from here in order to use those in future lesson plans. But I don't see myself actually using these in the classroom, and I don't see myself rereading them. So anyone else who wants to understand different aspects of World War II and genocide and the Holocaust, that person might just get more out of this because I got what I needed out of it. Time for the last stack, which is books that I am just never gonna read. This is the hardest for me, even though all the books that I pulled for this stack, it's not a lot, but this is the struggle I have and why I don't DNF books, because I always think this could potentially be really good. There's a reason people love it, but it's okay to say, you know what, there's other books that are way more on my priority list than these books, and that's perfectly fine. First one is Eveything Everything by Nicola Yoon. There's a movie, right? As we can see from the cover, that this is a screenshot from the movie. I picked this up because it sounds really wholesome, it sounds really sweet, it might be something that I really enjoy, but honestly, if anything, I'll just get it from my library or maybe listen to it on audio because this is not on my priority list. I don't know, it's not vibing with me. I don't know what it is, but it's fine. If it gets picked up in the future, maybe, but right now, no. On a similar train of some other books that are in this video, The Shack, let's be real. It's not gonna happen. When I picked this up, I did not know that it was Christian fiction. Christian fiction is just not my jam, and that's okay. This is another book that has a very big following. I hope someone else really enjoys this. I didn't even crack it open, but there's no point in reading a book in a genre that I know is not something that appeals to me. Just give it to someone else so hopefully it becomes a new favorite for them. Lastly are some art history books that, let's just be really honest with you, these are really old editions of art history books. I don't need them. I was gifted these by my brother because he knows that I'm an art teacher, and I've got about Michelangelo and the Pope. I've got Picasso, who I can't stand, let's be real, he's a jerk. And then Leonardo da Vinci. I'm not gonna reread these. I have resources online that I would rather use for my classroom. There's videos that I can watch. I have other like smaller articles that just get to the meat of what it is about these artists that I needed to know in order to turn them into art history lessons for my students. But I'm not gonna read these. Let's just be real. And I can't stand Picasso. He was so misogynist. I can't stand him. Some of these titles are really surprising, but this feels really liberating at the same time. Does anyone else do fall unhauls? The end of the year just feels like a perfect time to look at our shelves and say, you know what? It's time for a fresh start, and that's what we're doing. Yeah, there's way too many books to hold up for a thumbnail. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Thank you guys so much for watching this year's fall unhaul. I post videos every week, and I'll catch you later. Bye!
What's it making, Mr. Wonka? Mr. Wonka, work the factory.